Tonight, aftershocks from another presidential bombshell rippled through Washington.
The president then canceled the trip.
As the president and the Speaker of the House trade barbs over a government shutdown now in its record 28th day. Tens of thousands of protesters defend the unborn in the 45th March for Life on Washington.
We'd really like to get back to a culture of life.
All that and a pro-life fashion line tonight. Welcome to Faith Nation. I'm Jennifer Wishon. We begin tonight with a second meeting. The White House announced today the president will hold a second summit with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un at the end of next month. The two met last summer in Singapore to discuss the denuclearization of North Korea. The White House will announce the location of the meeting at a later date. President Trump reportedly directed his personal attorney to lie to Congress. A BuzzFeed report claims the president directed Michael Cohen to lie about negotiations to build a Trump Tower in Moscow. The report adds then candidate Trump supported a plan to visit Russia during the presidential campaign in order to meet with Russian President Vladimir Putin to negotiate the project. Earlier this week, the president's nominee for attorney general was asked about obstruction of justice during his confirmation hearing.
You wrote on page 1 that a president persuading a person to commit perjury would be obstruction. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Or any person who persuades another to, yeah.
Okay. You also said that a president or any person convincing a witness to change testimony would be obstruction. Is that right?
Yes.
So if there was some reason to believe that the president tried to coach somebody not to testify or testify falsely, that could be obstruction of justice.
Yes, under that, under an obstruction statute, yes.
Well, to help us break down the big news from BuzzFeed and what it could mean for President Trump, I am joined by Rick Klein, political director for ABC News, and our very own chief political analyst, David Brody. Gentlemen, thank you for being here. Guys, first, can we touch on the veracity of this BuzzFeed article? Is this a reliable source, David?
Well, I guess we're going to wait and see. I will say this. BuzzFeed has had a history, whether it be publishing the entire dossier at one point, that controversial dossier. And not just that, but Jason Leopold, one of the reporters, has had somewhat of a checkered past. Publishing in 2006 a story about Karl Rove, saying that Karl Rove was going to be indicted, and then he had to retract that story. So all of this baggage is kind of coming up. So now we wait and see whether or not this ends up being true. But boy, if true, Rick, I would think that's got to be a big deal.
I think it's a game changer of a story if it proves to be true. I mean, the headline alone kind of tells you how the narrative changes suddenly. This is not about kind of obscure legal statutes or obscure conversations. This would be the president of the United States telling someone to go lie about something. Now, that's a big deal, and I think, as even his attorney general nominee acknowledged earlier in the week, that's a crime. And you've had a number of Democrats who have not been publicly on the record on impeachment saying, if this is true, then impeachment has to be discussed. And I think that's where the discussion moves.
Well, David, what do you think this does mean for the president?
Well, here's the disclaimer. The disclaimer is one word, and it's if. That word, if. And it's in bold, and it's that 48 font, and it's all caps. However, if that goes away, and this indeed is true, as Rick was talking about, I got to tell you, it feels to me like game, set, match for the president, because there doesn't seem to be much wiggle room here. I mean, but here's the possible saving grace for the White House and the Trump administration. How do you prove the smoking gun? I mean, in other words, if this is Michael Cohen's word, a convicted liar, according to what the special counsel is saying, then it makes you wonder that if it's a he said situation, then I wonder whether or not this goes anywhere past that.
I wonder, Rick, is that a problem for Bob Mueller? Because you look at his star witnesses so far, and these are guys who have said, yeah, I lied.
Yeah, and look, they're unreliable, and you have to think that Bob Mueller knows that if you're going to try to take a case to a grand jury. I don't believe the way Bob Mueller would work would just be taking the word of unreliable individuals. If everything is built on people who are lying and admit to lying, as David notes in federal court, that's not a case. We do know that Mueller, or the Southern District of New York, rather, seized a whole cache of records from Michael Cohen's office. That's what got a lot of the ball rolling a while back. What's in there? We also know that Michael Cohen has recordings. Is there a recording that documents this in some way? Are there emails and communications? That's what BuzzFeed is suggesting, is that there is corroborating evidence. I think all of that's important. If it is just Michael Cohen's word, I think the White House, the president, have a pretty good response to say this is a guy that's got sour grapes. He has said he's lying in the past. Do not believe anything that he's saying.
Well, taking this ship in a different direction, we are now in the 28th day of this partial government shutdown. We have seen President Trump and the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, going at each other tit for tat. Who has the upper hand right now?
You know, nobody looks good. I don't know that anyone in the public thinks that, you know, taking away the State of the Union on one hand and then saying, well, you can't fly on your trip on the other hand, it doesn't make anyone look good. Okay. I do think, though, this is a week where Pelosi has shown herself to be a co-equal force to Donald Trump, and that, I think, is a bit of a wake-up call. I think the president expected by now that there'd be enough cracks in the Democratic ranks. That hasn't happened. There haven't been widespread defections on the Republican side either, but we're seeing why Pelosi is as good as she is and why she's been doing it at the level she has for as long as she has. She is playing right back. She is playing his game, and I wouldn't say winning necessarily, but holding her own.
She is holding her own. I think the question is then there's a ... for now. I just wonder how long this goes on. I mean, Donald Trump will get in the gutter with anybody, and Pelosi doesn't necessarily want to go there, but she'll go there if she has to. But I got to tell you, I mean, he's a New York street brawler who all he cares about is winning. And so I just think that ultimately Chuck and Nancy didn't quite expect Donald Trump to go this far on the shutdown. I think they're used to Republicans caving. Right. They don't know what Donald Trump's going to do next, and I think that's Donald Trump's biggest weapon at this point.
Well, in the meantime, there's plenty of job security for folks like us to watch it all unfold.
We have a lot of material to work with.
Right. That's right. Rick Klein, David Brody, thank you.
Thank you.
Tens of thousands of pro-life Americans marched for life in Washington today. For activists, it was their 46th annual trek down the National Mall, and they were met with not one, but two surprise guests. Here's our senior Washington correspondent, Paul Strand.
The pro-life movement, like all those gathered here for the March for Life, is vast, with people representing all sorts of interests and ideas inside of the movement.
And we gather here because we believe, as our founders did, that we are, all of us, born and unborn, endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights, and first among these rights is the right to life.
Vice President Pence also introduced a special guest.
This is a movement founded on love and grounded in the nobility and dignity of every human life. When we look into the eyes of a newborn child, we see the beauty and the human soul and the majesty of God's creation. We know that every life has meaning and that every life is worth protecting.
The president reiterated his support for the Hyde Amendment and other pro-life legislation.
I will always defend the first right in our Declaration of Independence, the right to life.
Brian Fisher of Human Coalition wants to see this administration do even more to tackle abortion, like how it's escalated the fight against opioids.
HHS, Health and Human Services, has just launched a 5-point plan to be able to combat the opioid addiction crisis, which unfortunately kills 115 people every day in the country. We support HHS launching that plan. Our question is simply, abortion kills 3,000 preborn children a day. Where is the 5-point plan to end the leading cause of death in America?
Susanna Edwards let her outfit do the talking. She hopes people will look at her dress made of baby clothes and think of all the lives that ended before they could wear those little outfits.
All of this has been worn by a real baby, and there are many babies that won't get to this point. And so the natural reaction to baby clothes, people are, you know, the awe and all of that, but I want that kind of the care and affection to be brought to the unborn child as well as the born child.
Elaine Webster wants women to avoid the pain she still feels decades later over her abortion and the counsel she got from a pro-choice doctor.
She told me that it was nothing more than a little sprouted wheat seed.
Her husband Barry still feels guilty about not trying to talk Elaine out of it and called out men who don't fight for their unborn babies.
The fact that I didn't support my wife really led to us making that decision. Stand up. You know, it's our purpose to support our women.
27 students came here together from small Colorado Christian University, showing what an issue this is for young people today.
Just the fact of what abortion is and what it does to people. And so I think we're out here because we care for all of life, all of people.
Susie Oddie traveled from South Carolina for this march.
I have real heart for babies and, well, people in general. They're all God's creation, and they should not be killed.
But her sister Joanne Gonzalez came all the way from California, saying abortion defies God's intent to create life.
Generation after generation, it's His plan, and we're thwarting it through abortion.
So much is on the line. Abortion is now the #1 cause of death. 42 million babies slaughtered across the world last year alone. That's 125,000 a day. That's why these people march, to end that. Paul Strand, CBN News, reporting from the March for Life.
Paul Strand, thank you. We're joined now by Walter Hoy, all the way from California.
Yeah.
Thank you for being with us.
It's awesome.
You were actually arrested outside of an abortion clinic in California for simply holding a sign that says, "God loves you and your baby. Let us help you." Tell us how women who were coming to this abortion clinic responded to you and your sign.
Well, the women were asking the 3 questions that were asked on my sign, and we were letting them know that God did love them, God loved them and their baby, and that we would help them. And it didn't matter what they needed. It could be groceries, it could be a place to stay. It didn't matter. We were going to help them, and because we did, that got to be a problem for the abortion clinic.
So women were actually coming to the clinic to seek your counsel.
To get help. One day there were 27 appointments at this abortion clinic during a 2-hour time frame. There was no way they could do 27 abortions in a 2-hour time frame, but they weren't coming for an abortion. They knew there was a preacher on the sidewalk helping women, and they came by just to get the help.
Wow. And you were arrested.
Yes, ultimately they created a law that made it illegal for me to stand on a sidewalk within 100 feet of an abortion clinic. This is a public sidewalk, holding a sign, passing out literature, and having a conversation.
Well, an investigative journalist, Robert Artigo, has written a book about your experience. It is called Black and Pro-Life in America. That is quite a title. Why is that appropriate and also interesting?
Well, I think Robert did a great job writing the book, and the title is appropriate because the abortion issue is the most controversial issue in the Black church. We'll talk about almost everything but this issue, and so it gets into why that's a controversial topic and what we can do about it in the future.
Why is it not kind of just a settled issue, you think, in the Black church?
Well, it really should be a settled issue. There's no question biblically that the child inside the womb, created by God, is a living, breathing human being. And we all know what it's like to not be considered human in the Black community.
That's very true. Well, sir, you are all the way from California. You know, folks typically think about California as being pretty liberal and not so concerned or interested in the pro-life movement per se. But tell us about the pro-life movement in California.
Well, let me say that the pro-life movement in California is actually pretty strong. As a matter of fact, on January 26th, the Walk for Life West Coast will be taking place in San Francisco. I'm going to be one of the speakers there. I'll be joining Abby Johnson as well as many others, and we'll have about 50,000 people there, so we're looking forward to it.
Wow. Well, Walter, thank you so much for joining us and sending the message that God loves everyone and their babies. We appreciate your time.
All right. Bless you.
Thank you. God bless you. Dr. Russell Moore is president of the Southern Baptist Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission. The evangelical leader sat down with CBN News Washington correspondent Amber Strong in Virginia to give us his evolving definition of what it means to be a pro-life Christian in America and more. Take a look.
So we are here for the Evangelicals for Life conference. What, if you had to sum it up into a sentence, what is the theme for this year?
Well, the theme is reborn people, born again, advocating for the vulnerable. And so we really ought to be the people who are applying the gospel of Jesus Christ across the board. And so we were people who were lost and are now saved and were now found, and we were blind and now we see. And so we ought to be the people who really understand what it means to be on mission with those that Jesus calls the least of these, his brothers and sisters.
Kind of leads into my next question. which seems to be evolving. What is pro-life?
Well, pro-life is a commitment to seeing every human being created in the image of God, regardless of that person's perceived usefulness to the rest of society. And that's one of the crises that we have right now. When we think about the unborn, we have a legal system that has sort of defined the personhood away from unborn children. And we see that in multiple other areas as well, not only here in America, but also around the world. It's the problem of people wanting to make other people invisible because they're inconvenient. So whether we're thinking about issues of euthanasia, thinking about issues of elder care, thinking about issues of what's happening with many people with disabilities who are being, in some cases, killed, and in some cases simply ignored. Commitment to the image of God and to God's valuing of all persons ought to change the way that we live.
You made an interesting point about surrogacy lately, something the church doesn't touch on very often. Kind of advocating for adoption more than surrogacy. Can you explain that a little better? What are you saying? Are you saying that surrogacy is a sin? Is it wrong? Or that adoption is better?
Yeah, I think that God has designed the one flesh union for children to come through the one flesh union. I think that some of our advanced reproductive technologies often turn children into a commodity, something to be manufactured, rather than a gift and a miracle that comes about through one flesh union. So I think that in many cases what happens is somebody who is part of one half of a previously infertile couple for many years, what I've noticed is that often people who are grappling with infertility only have one another to talk to. So there may be a support group in the church for those who are grappling with infertility, but no one else in the body of Christ, which means that often the only people that one is able to talk to are those in the healthcare profession who are offering a specific alternative. I think there's a better way. I think there are all sorts of reproductive technologies that can fix problems that cause infertility that I think are perfectly appropriate and ethical, but not those that bypass the one flesh union.
Is there a void there? As a woman, as a Christian woman, there's something that's deep within us that tells us we need to have children.
Yeah.
And then when it doesn't happen, there's a void. So what can the church be doing to kind of step in there?
Yeah. Well, I think many things. One of those things is to acknowledge infertility and the genuine pain and struggle of infertility that the Bible speaks to repeatedly. And so to talk about that very real reality, and also to not simply segregate out people who are grappling with infertility from the rest of the church, but actually minister to one another and be ministered to.
When we come back, more from Dr. Russell Moore, his take on media backlash after the vice president's wife decided to take a job teaching art at a Christian school. Stay with us. Tonight, we know the names of the U.S. service members killed by ISIS in a suicide attack in Syria. 37-year-old Jonathan Farmer from Florida was a chief warrant officer for the U.S. Army. Shannon Kent was a 35-year-old New Yorker and a chief cryptologic tech for the U.S. Navy. Scott Wirtz from Missouri was assigned to the Defense Intelligence Agency for operations support. This week, the announcement that Karen Pence would return to a Christian elementary school to teach art was met with critical headlines. Newspapers fixated on the Northern Virginia school's insistence that teachers, parents, and students adhere to biblical views on marriage. The vice president responded to those attacks.
The attacks on Christian education by the mainstream media have got to stop. I mean, we cherish the freedom of religion in this country. This administration stands foursquare for the freedom of religion of people of all faiths. And to see the mainstream media criticize my wife because she's choosing to return to the classroom of an elementary Christian school is wrong. Again, the attacks on Christian education must end.
And we spoke to Dr. Russell Moore for his take on the Pence family and Christian teachings under fire.
This one is a little more headlining. In the news today was a story about Second Lady Karen Pence taking a job at Emmanuel Christian, a school here in Virginia.
Yeah.
The school has a policy about traditional marriage. And so she's kind of getting criticized for it. And I guess the question is the criticism because of her role as Second Lady, or is the criticism because of just the changing culture and in the world and the acceptance of different things, and that we as the church need to accept it? Where does the criticism fall? Or the school itself and its policies?
Well, I think the criticism of the Second Lady is completely illegitimate, because it's based upon the assumption that not only can an evangelical Christian not operate in a faith-based setting when one is simply married to someone who is an elected official, but neither could an Orthodox Jewish person or a Muslim person or a Roman Catholic person or Eastern Orthodox. I mean, these views about what marriage is and what sexuality is for are held by multiple religions and faith traditions. And so there's an assumption in some avenues of American life that would say, in order to be a part of acceptable society, you have to be willing to adopt the sexual revolution as almost a theology. That's not a legitimate way for us to operate as Americans. What we should say instead is, we have disagreements on some of these issues. We'll seek to persuade one another, we'll debate one another, but we're not going to try to marginalize one another out of existence.
Well, can't decide what to wear for the March for Life? When we come back, the story of how one mother teamed up with her daughters to help fashionistas wear their Christian values on their sleeve. Tens of thousands took part in the March for Life today, but who were they wearing? Here's Jenna Browder.
But the big joke in our family was that I was either going to have to start sewing, which is a really bad idea, Jenna, because I'm very good with a glue gun, but not with a sewing machine, or we were going to have to start our own fashion line.
And that's exactly what Carla DeDesi and her 3 daughters did, introducing Call 1972.
We were eating pasta. That's what good Italian families do. And this idea came up, and we sketched everything on a piece of paper. And we thought of Call 1972. We'd really like to get back to a culture of life. The year 1972. 1973 is when our Supreme Court ruled that the tiniest people did not have the right to life. And since 1973, there's 60 million tiny people who have not had the right to life.
Carla says the line is meant for girls just like her daughters.
So we say that we're street chic because you'll notice that the 10 to 30-year-olds just kind of live in this athleisure wear. Tights and really comfy fleece sweatshirts. So we worked with a designer in LA, in California, that has launched brands before, because we really want this brand to be excellent. We don't want to do it in a shabby way, because it's not only representing my family, but celebration of life, this whole entire movement. And so we worked with her, and we chose kind of colors that we thought kids would like, that are really hot right now.
She says the reception so far has been huge, pointing to just how many pro-life young women there are out there.
So we did the research, by the way, also. 18 million teens, tweens, millennials, girls in the United States, 18 million of them. 9 million of them identify as being pro-life, which was such an encouragement to my daughters and to I, that 9 million identify as loving life. So we thought, wow, if we can just present a product to these young girls that they feel beautiful wearing, glamorous wearing, and then it's just this great message that they can share with their college friends, their high school friends, their family.
She says their pieces are also great conversation starters.
The messaging is very quiet, you know, and we're actually sharing with the kids how to talk about the messaging. So Call 1972, if someone comes up and says, I love that camo hat that you have on, what does 1972 mean? You can say that's a year that we just celebrated all life, an amazing year. We'd like to get back to that time.
And for families who want to support companies with values that align with theirs.
But really, I'm a mom of 3 daughters, so, you know, our cardio is shopping, honestly, you know? Like, we are shopping all the time, and we just felt a little bit marginalized because some of the messaging that was on the shirts just went against our core principles, our core values. And then again, like I said, a lot of these people are using spokespeople that maybe do not stand for the national anthem, which is so important to our family. We just feel like it's such a privilege to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance or the national anthem, for those heroes that have gone before us, or even today, right now, that are fighting for our freedom. So we want to support companies that support our core values. So we say that Cole 1972 is guilt-free shopping. It is going to be shopping that is family approved, mom and daddy approved, but also kid approved.
So neat. Well, you can learn more about Cole 72 on our website, cbnnews.com. That's it for Faith Nation. Have a great weekend.